Good afternoon and welcome to Gender Speaker Live. And today I've got some friends, some guests with me, and we're going to be talking about, well, it all started with a little bit of a rant on one of the speaker forums, for professional speaker forums, which exploded into an interesting discussion about the inequality of the way in which women are treated as speakers. So that's really what we're going to be talking about. Just generally, how are women treated unequally through our language and through the way that we're treated in public? So let's have a look at it. Hi, and welcome to Jackie Barrie and to Cathy Towers. Now, I've got a few little notes here that I was looking at, just so we know. Jackie Barrie is a copywriting trainer for recruiters, journalists, marketing teams, business owners, and aspiring copywriters. So Jackie's going to be talking a little bit about some of the issues around the way in which copy can, in very many cases, push women into a secondary position and how we can change that around. And Cathy is a business therapy speaker, money mentor, DJ, Phonetic M. I'm going to actually have to ask you about that. DJ at Phonetic M FM. So that's my two guests today. So I'm going to start off talking to Jackie about this because, Jackie, it was your rant on the professional speakers members page about the way in which women are often put in the. I know it's the Mr. Mr. this, Mr. that, and then it's here's Jackie. So tell us a little bit about what it is that sort of won't fired you up to for your rant, which got so much traction on the site.
It all started about a decade ago when I was at a networking meeting, and the chairman, who was a man, went round the table one by one, introducing all the men as Mr. whoever and all the women just by first name. And it just became really noticeable. I took him aside at the end of the meeting and said, "Were you aware you even did that?" And he hadn't been aware, but he didn't really get the point I was making. And the following week, he did the exact same thing. But ever since that experience, I've had a heightened sensitivity to it. And I think the whole issue of gender equality and awareness and how we use language is very topical at the moment. And I think within the PSA, the group which we all belong to, the Professional Speaking Association, I think that presenters and speakers and trainers within that association have a raised consciousness and are generally very careful to address their audiences in a way that won't offend anybody. So it was really interesting to me that in the last few months, 4 of the PSA men who were MCs or hosts of events did that exact same thing. They introduced the men as Mr. and the women as first name. And so when it had happened the 4th time, that's what triggered the rant. And I've actually had private conversations with each of the 4 to discuss it and talk it through. And one interesting thing that came out of that Facebook discussion was how open some of the men were to realise that they had unconsciously been doing this and that it had never been brought to their attention before. And the challenge is, what do you call the women if you can't call them Mrs., Miss, Ms., Doctor, or Professor, or whatever title? In the PSA context, I think most of those titles are probably obsolete, and we're quite informal amongst ourselves, and using first names is all we need. It's slightly different for those events that have that convention of being opened by a more formal introduction, or maybe other cultures in the world. My lords, ladies and gentlemen. And that leads into the whole other part of that conversation.
It's really interesting, this whole issue, because, what do you do immediately how do you pronounce MX? It's one of the questions I'm constantly asked, because I use the title MX very often now, mix. And of course, we've got, at the moment, a Liberal Democrat is putting a private member's bill through Parliament that will allow people to have a passport that is neither male nor female. It has now got an X marker on it as neither male nor female. I was looking around for something to help introduce this little topic. So just very briefly, I'm just going to show a very, very short video, which I think you'll find quite funny because it introduces part of what we're talking about.
Ladies and gentlemen and others.
So then we've got David Bowie with the others, and that was obviously a long time ago when, well, he's obviously gone, that died now. But I used to go to a club in London where it was ladies, gentlemen, and those who have yet to decide, or ladies and gentlemen and in-betweenies and all sorts of things. But it always gets a laugh. And there's the question. If you though create a laugh every time you say somebody who's not male or female, ha, 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 what is that doing to the morale of the people who identify as neither male or female? If you do something which creates a laugh, like the and now let me introduce the lovely, the gorgeous Jackie Barrie. How does that make you feel when everybody else is being introduced as, you know, as a result of their credentials or whatever, and suddenly they choose to do that? And I've also been noticing this silly thing where it used to happen even to someone like Margaret Thatcher. One woman amongst sort of 20 business leaders. And here's Margaret Thatcher. And today she's wearing a blue suit. And you think, well, why? Why was that necessary? Nobody mentioned that, you know, Ronald Reagan was wearing a really slick Armani suit. It's just, you know, why did we do that? So, Cathy, you've got some...
Yeah, you're reminding me of back in the 80s when we tried to take out marital status, Miss or Mrs, and become Ms. But nobody would use that term except for single women. So it just became synonymous with feminists, really.
Yeah.
And having spoken to a few people about that in more recent years, I remember my sister-in-law actually saying, why would I use Ms? I'm proud to be married and I want people to know I'm married, otherwise I lose status. I thought, whoa, that's a unusual one, isn't it? And actually quite a few people have said that to me since as well.
That marriage and that a husband's status transfers to the wife, and so if a husband has a high status, then the woman becomes of the same status and is raised up as a
Absolutely. So this is marital privilege, if you like, for women. And
do you think the same applies if a woman marries beneath her? If she marries someone who's, I'm joking. If a woman marries somebody who has a very low status, but maybe they're a doctor, but they marry somebody who's, you know, self-employed builder.
I think they are becoming under the protection of another. Back in the 80s, when I was sort of protesting about this, it was about male-female marriages because we didn't have same-sex marriages at that time. But now we've got other differences creeping in. So I'm wondering how people are beginning to feel about it now.
Yeah, I think increasingly women are. I know a lot of women who didn't change their name when they got married, for example. Now I first came across that actually back in the 1970s. I was working in the insurance industry, and there was a very, very one of the actuaries. I don't know whether you know what an actuary is like. You know, you start with a honours degree in mathematics, and then you work for 6 years to become an actuary. So super mathematicians. Prediction, trying to work on probabilities and things. So she was a hugely qualified and very, very bright woman. And most actuaries in the insurance industry end up being senior directors or managing directors. They end up running companies. But she was struggling like mad because all the time she was being put down. She found herself forced to have to wear suits. And almost conform to this male image, the sort of norm that permeated the whole organization. And when she got married, then she said, that's it, I'm not changing my name. And she really adamantly stuck to the fact that she was not going to. But then I've known people whose husbands have refused to, or whose partners have refused to get married if they wouldn't change their name. So it's another part of it, isn't it? I mean, what do you think, Jack? That's positioning women all the time as other.
Oh, yes, it's such an interesting topic, isn't it? Just to pick up something you said before I answer that one, is talking about M/F/X.
Oh, yeah.
That's a legal requirement on job ads in Germany to show that they're open to everyone. In the UK, we've got the Equality Act 2010 that means all jobs are open to everyone. And companies are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of what's called a protected characteristic. And most of the protected characteristics are stuff that you can't change even if you wanted to. So going back to your question, and partly what do we call people if they don't want to be called he, she, or they? It reminded me of this book that I read, Woman on the Edge of Time. And it has in it a utopian feminist future where everybody is referred to as per, which took me a little while to realise is probably short for person. And the first time you come across it in the book, you think, what's that? I don't get it. What's it mean? But it doesn't take very long before you're immersed in this fantasy future world where this is the norm. And that is how you start to think. And this is the power of words to change how people's attitudes are and how they behave. And there is another section in the book that addresses the question you asked just there, where we're in a culture where it is the norm for the woman to change her surname on marriage to a man. That's the cultural norm. In this book, when a child reaches teenager years, they go off into the forest for a week to find themselves, but they come back with a name of their own choice. The main character in the book finds that very odd. And the response from these future people is, well, you keep changing your surname. What's the big deal about changing your first name? And of course, as the reader, you then think, oh, yeah, well, there's a point there. Why do we make a big deal about changing names? And surely the answer is just to address people by the name that they want to be known as, or by the title that they want to be known as on an individual basis. It's grouping people and stereotyping them, which is where all this problem arises.
Now, obviously, I mean, I changed my name as a result of changing my gender. And it took me a couple of years to sort of settle on a name that I thought would work. I was finding that a lot of people couldn't adjust if I shifted my name dramatically away. And certainly, my family I think still haven't got it. Even though it was, my name was Richard. I changed it to Rochelle and then shortened it to Ricky, but spelt it Rikki, which is in America, Germany, and a few other places is more of a female name than a male name. But it also enabled me to have a fairly androgynous name. And I quite like the idea of names where you think, oh, is that male or female? I can't tell. Is that Nikki or whatever? And what we're seeing is a lot of that where you can't tell from the name what someone, whether someone is male or female.
And in most work contexts, it's irrelevant anyway.
In reality, when application forms are now submitted, there should be no evidence whatsoever of whether you're male or female. But it is really, really hard to hide whether you're male or female, because if you look at someone's career path, I mean, you look at my CV and it says, what's your education? What schools did you go to? Well, mine starts with Corsham Secondary School for Boys. And it's not many girls went there. So that becomes really a little bit more difficult and the kind of career path I had and the kind of jobs I had, and I have a lot of friends who were like, they've changed gender now, but then they were SAS, they were in the police, they were in the fire. And that whole background really means that they're instantly branded, oh, they're male. And that then causes...
Or assumed that they're male.
Yes.
So there could be somebody who's in those sort of forces and services,
Absolutely.
they're assumed they're male.
But I have friends who are professors and doctors, and they arrive at hotels. It's Dr. Smith. Oh yes, when will he be arriving? No. I'm Dr. Smith. And that constantly happens. So we have this. I don't know whether any of you have ever taken these tests. Harvard run. It's sorry.
Yes, I know the ones you mean.
Yeah, it's the test on really how unconsciously biased you are, and it is amazing. And the name will come to me. My mind is forgetting words at the moment. But I tried the test on association of female with home, men with work, and I thought, no, I'll be calling it now. So totally unconsciously biased towards women at home and women and men at work, and it's just the microsecond differences between responding on two keys when you're associating different words. But you were going to talk quite a bit about words, Jackie, because that's your business, isn't that?
Well, what you've just said fits quite closely with something that I talk about often. It also fits with what Dr. Linda Shaw says about unconscious bias is something that is programmed into us as humans to protect us. It is one of our shortcuts for decision making. So there's nothing wrong with having it, but being aware of it and then what you do about it is something else. Now, in the context of training recruiters, they are increasingly aware of diversity and inclusion when it comes to writing their job ads. And there was a study done, I think it's about 7 or 8 years ago now, about gendered language. And the researchers looked at some predominantly female jobs and some predominantly male jobs and came up with these word lists that were commonly used to recruit for those sectors. And the lists are labelled male or female words. Well, that's turned into a tool that recruiters can use to paste their text, and it will give them a score to say whether their language is mostly male, mostly female, or balanced.
Right.
Now, that information is something that they could do something with, because although it's illegal to recruit only for a man or only for a woman, by manipulating the language that you use, you could write an ad that feels as though a woman would belong in that job or that a man would belong in that job. Now, the truth of it is it goes beyond the job ad, because the work environment itself has to be inclusive and welcoming, and that goes beyond what a recruiter can influence. But that study with the word lists I find very interesting. The word strong isn't on the list. But for example, the word competitive is on the male word list and the word cooperative is on the female word list. And there's a lot more to it. It's quite an academic study if you want to read it, and the words lists are at the end of it. And it hasn't been repeated to my knowledge since then, but it seems to be quite a robust piece of work for its time.
It's the problem I found. I mean, one of the things I found when I changed gender, I shifted like so many trans women and became from stereotypically male to stereotypically female. Now, the stereotypically male was a cover because I didn't want people to find out and know that I was trans or gay or LGBT or whatever. So what a lot of men do if they're gay or trans, particularly back in the days when it was illegal or definitely very, very frowned upon. You get married, you cover it up, you take a very macho job, and you get actually quite homophobic and making really, really strong comments against things in order to deflect any possibility that somebody might think the other. So changing over, I've shifted completely the other way, and there was a period of time when I was finding life very, very hard, because part of the time I was living as a woman. My social life was almost like all female. My work life was all male. And so my body language started to get mixed up. And I remember being at a meeting and somebody said something and I just simply went, oh my God, and just brought my hand to my chest. And somebody said, Ricky, you can't do that. You're dressed as a man right now. And I just suddenly realized that we have these rules, very, very strict rules about conforming to gender norms. And once you break them, people enforce them, they enforce what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to behave. And it happens from young children right the way through.
My home office overlooks a primary school playground, and they're about age 4 to 7. And when it rains, the little girls run screaming inside, and the little boys stand there with their arms to the sky getting soaked. It starts really young, doesn't it, this difference?
Isn't it?
And even that is, looks like the generalisation, but is there one girl in there standing there with her hands up the way? You know,
well, I don't stand and watch them because that would also be weird.
Yeah, but I'm saying we see the mass of what's happening and we miss the exceptions. I think
those exceptions are going to have such peer pressure on them to behave with their cohort, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
So I just had to mute because you could probably hear my dogs. And so one of the things that interests me is you said, Jackie, one of the big problems is that you've got MCs are not being aware of that. Now, obviously, trying to teach every MC what to do is a big challenge. But it seems to me probably the best thing to do is to put your own introduction together in such a way that you give people an introduction that covers these sorts of challenges.
I would say as a good MC, it's your task to ask a speaker how they want to be introduced and respect that. But I don't see it as my job to train all MCs about what they should say. I can tell you what I do. And this partly I got from the world of ill-devised comedy, which I was also exploring and enjoying and discovering for the few years before lockdown. And there was a thread in one of their Facebook groups about why it's not appropriate to start with ladies and gentlemen, why guys can be a problem in some audience members or folks or any of those other generalizations. And since then, I find a word that applies unequivocally, luckily I write better than I talk, to everyone in the room. So I'll normally start with something like, hello, lovely audience, or hello, lovely recruiters, or hello, lovely journalists. And that predisposes them to be lovely, I hope. And it gets a little laugh because they're not used to it. And it's a fit with the brand and the way that my personal way of communicating. But you don't even need to say that because you can just start with, hello, everyone, or just go straight into your impactful opening statement.
This is an issue that I noticed happening within Toastmasters because there is a tendency to get up in Toastmaster clubs, ladies and gentlemen. And I noticed that or what we tried to coach people in Toastmasters, and Marina mentioned this on one of the posts that we were talking about. Marina Roberts is very heavily involved with the Association of Speakers Clubs. And the Toastmaster thing was fellow Toastmasters welcome guests. So that immediately got rid of the whole idea of any kind of gendering. So it does make sense, doesn't it? But I think as speakers, we constantly have to think about when we get up to speak, how do we address people? So,
except that Toastmaster is already gendered.
Yeah.
Because that used to be a big thing in my local Toastmasters, and we called our group Southwest Speakers. So it was fellow speakers. But
just fellow speakers, yeah.
Fellow is also gendered.
Oh, no, I'm a Freemason, okay? And I was a master of Freemasons Lodge, worshipful brother. And so I thought, well, now I've changed my gender, I would inquire and see whether I could join a women's Masonic group, because there are some around. There were two problems. First, I had to start from scratch and go all the way through. I said, that's silly. I know all the rituals. I've actually run the and the second thing I discovered was they still use all the same terminology from the male Toastmasters. So they all call each other brother. And I thought, oh, that's very, very odd. And now I've had a letter from from Freemasons saying it's okay if you've changed gender, you can still come. We're happy to still have people who used to be men, but now women can still be brothers in the. You never ever leave Freemasonry. So I'm not going back.
But people have to think about that, don't they?
Yeah.
It's not. a challenge happens, that they actually consider it even, and they have to go through their own process to work it out.
But this issue of male and female terms is really a big problem, because we were talking before we started, Jackie, weren't we, about the master mistress. Totally different ideas. To call somebody mistress is now. Once upon a time, if you look at I'm thinking of the Les Miserables, the musical, and there's master of the house, and there's other people there called mistress. And if you look at Shakespeare's plays, mistress was actually a very strong character. But now mistress has become, in our modern language, mistress generally means somebody who's knocking off the other woman in some kind of relationship. Again, putting the woman down. You never talk about the other man. It's always the other one. But I find the same thing, actors and actresses, comedians and comedians. Should we be trying to encourage, or I personally try to just drop them. I think of people as actors. They're speakers, they're actors, they're managers, they're not manageresses. Because once again, I think that term manageress tends to put women down. It makes women somehow lower than a manager.
And this is the problem with the language, because language carries meaning and value. And that's why you have to be so careful about the words you choose. Sorry, Cathy, I spoke over you.
No, I agree, absolutely. With the exception of the word guy, I don't want the word guy used at all. Because it's being used so often now as a collective. And I think both of you have probably seen the little video I did at PSA, just a 1 minute.
Yes.
Close your eyes and imagine a room full of guys. And who do you see in there? Open your eyes. And how many of you saw women in that room? Only 2 out of 80. And I've had that repeated by Jackie Handy as well. She's tried it with other groups. And it's the same. Now, we might say that that's because there's an older group in the PSA generally. Yeah. But I thought you would. Sorry, go on. I've spoken with younger people, and I said, "But would you call an individual female a guy?" No. Okay, so it's not a general term, is it?
No, it's when it's like it's a collective noun, isn't it? Not an individual. Mm-hmm. But there's a challenge. If it's all women, they will still say guys. What's the alternative? Because I get lots and lots of people very upset about girls, because women as a group will often, no matter what their age, come on, girls, let's do this. And some people get really, really offended, because, again, what it's trying to do is to make women immediately feel as if they are somehow frivolous and young and, of no consequence.
People.
Guys and dolls, isn't it? It's the same.
But also it's being used as a filler word, I find now. I listened to somebody who was speaking for about 3 or 4 minutes and used the word guys 11 times. It was driving me batty.
Yeah.
And I hear this a lot on stage. It's the new filler word. And it's exclusive.
Do you think it's men who've adopted it as an alternative to?
It's both.
Both.
I think generally I hear more men use it, but I also hear women using it as well. Even women who deny that they use it.
So what would you use as a sort of collective noun for a group of people?
Just people.
Just people?
Yes. Actually, you mentioned Phonic FM. I've got a fellow DJ who runs the heavy metal show, and he tries to degenderize his show, and he uses the term lovely humans. So that's similar to yours, Jackie.
Okay. So what is Phonic FM? You've got to tell us what Phonic FM is.
Phonic FM is Exeter's sound alternative. So it's
Exeter's what alternative?
Sound alternative. Sound alternative.
Sound alternative. Oh, right. Oh, so it's alternative music. Okay.
Yeah, just alternative to all the mainstream stuff.
Oh, sounds. I wish we had. I don't think we've got anything like that up in Hull. But so when you're copywriting, Jackie, what are you doing? Are you finding this is something you really have to be conscious of all the time when you're, in terms of recruitment ads and various other stuff that you're writing, trying to make sure that you de-gender, that you remove any sense of which gender you're talking about?
Now that's a different thing, because I will write according to a brief of who the audience is.
Right.
So, for example, I was tasked with writing an ad for a product that was going to be marketed in a men's magazine and in a women's magazine. And the research from the readership was that the men wanted the product to perform in a completely different way to what the women wanted from it. So I had to write a different ad. And the challenge was, well, how can you, a woman, write in the voice of an ad for a man? To which my answer is, well, if I was a novelist writing a murder novel, I don't actually have to kill anybody, because the secret is all in the research. So coming back to speakers and MCs, it's research. It's asking the right questions and then reflecting back the language that you're given.
Right. Interesting. So
and also, I suppose that one-to-one communication is so much easier than one-to-many.
Yeah, because you're talking about a specific person. But I mean, I one of the big issues that's coming up now is the thing on pronouns. I use increasingly now they, them, theirs. Now my friend Jamie is non-binary, uses they, them, theirs, and I'll be honest, it has taken me a few years. And I'm still getting it wrong. I'm still using the wrong pronouns. And the thing is, this doesn't affect the communication from one to one. This only affects me talking about Jamie to somebody else, and remembering and to say they, them. And when I write it using they, them, and of course I get all sorts of battles then from the grammar purists who say, no, you can't use they, them, theirs in a singular. Well, yes, we can. And we do it all the time. Someone's left their coat. Can you tell them? And we automatically, when we don't know what the gender is, we use they, them, theirs as a singular pronoun. They're trying to get people to think about using it on a one-to-one. Now, one of the things I've noticed on Zoom meetings increasingly, and I'm now doing it automatically, is when I go on, click rename and add my pronouns after my name. Because I can then just flag to everybody I'm using these pronouns. That's just is how to refer. Because what will happen in a group is, Ricky said this, can you and they're going to use a pronoun and I will hear people talking about me, because that happens more in a Zoom type meeting than it does in a normal meeting, because we're all there, we're all talking about each other. So that, I think, is something I'm going to start now increasingly doing on workshops, and say, can you just type in your name and let's see exactly how you want to be called, because sometimes the name isn't the one we wanted to be there. You might have used a formal name when you booked on a course or something, so that's one thing, just to put your pronouns go.
I think there's something really important about that in terms of modelling. It's a leadership issue, actually, that we start modelling that openness to others, rather than just letting it ride and letting people decide individually. We're setting the tone for whatever event you're organising there.
Yeah, and I think when you're leading a thing, the first thing, for me, leading it, if I put these are my pronouns, that's it. It's an inclination there for everybody else to do the same. Yeah. But I'm still going to be struggling with the how do I address people, because I'm a person who's tended to use guys from time to time. That might be my background, which is influencing that. I've got the message: don't say girls if it's a group of women, because that's probably going to offend and upset someone. It is a quite touchy. Gender is such a touchy issue, isn't it? By the way, I've now remembered the Harvard thing. If you want to do the test on how unconsciously you bind, it's called the implicit association test. So if you just go and have a look, and they're all free, and you can just go on and test your, racial. Are you racially biased? Are you LGBT biased? And it's quite shocking to find out how biased we are. But I was also involved in marketing for most of my life, and our entire job as marketeers is to unconsciously bias people. That's all we try to do. Yeah. I want you to, if I sell beans, I want you to walk into a supermarket and not think about it, just grab my brand without thought. This is the whole thing. Our world is consciously trying to unconsciously bias every single person in favor of their products and in favor of their political ideals or whatever. So it's a difficult world to get rid of unconscious bias, and everybody's trying to bias us. And I think this is where a lot of the feelings about women and men and this gender binary is so consciously enforced within movies, within TV programs, in all sorts of ways. It's just thrown at us, isn't it? All the time. It's like a relentless push of, split into these groups.
And I think it's not about us getting it all right. It's about us just opening the conversations, creating a space for there to be more room for people who are other to move, and even people who do fall into the gender binary to move as well, because they are also restricted by these.
There's no way we can tell people. I remember a friend of mine who was the equalities officer at Hull City Council produced this list of words that were inappropriate, and in it was a few words like Yorkshire men have a tendency to call women flower.
I call everybody flower.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things. And flower ended up on this list. Well, you cannot believe the battle that caused. Front page headlines of the Hull Daily Mail. It was all about political correctness gone mad. Old men are now being told they can't call people flower. I'm going to call people flower.
That's the Daily Mail, in my view. That's just they're just deliberately provoking that.
This was the Hull Daily Mail, which is equally. I mean, I'm not going to go into. But the problem is that this is what happens. You bring out a list that says this is all the inappropriate language, and there will be people immediately get up and battle it. So it is a difficult situation. Did you find, Jackie, when you reminded people about what they were doing in their introductions, did they take it well, or were they a bit? Did any of them think?
Interesting. There was one who felt that he was showing respect to the men, right. To which I responded about the need to show equal respect in that case to the women. And that led to the conversation of, well, how do you do that when women have to reveal their marital status in a way that men don't? So that led in that direction. Another one went down the route of it being the comedic throwaway line, and how you can get away with something in comedy that you can't in a more serious situation. And so it is a very nuanced challenge. Mm-hmm. And I think your suggestion, Ricky, the onus is on you to, in your case, put your preferred pronouns on Zoom calls or documents, whatever else. And perhaps that's temporary, and over time that won't be so necessary. But for now, flagging it up is a responsibility that you hold and that you've taken. So the reaction of different people when you address it, I think, all comes to the intent behind the words, the meaning behind the words.
Yeah.
A Yorkshireman calling someone flower, I wouldn't find offensive. In fact, I'm not offended by much of this. I notice it.
Yes.
It doesn't wind me up. I notice it. And perhaps I then fall into judging the person that said it. So the word guys, for me, has come from America. It's come from a certain youth culture. And if we were having this conversation with young Americans, I think their view on the word guys would be very different to our view, because they've grown up with it having a very different meaning.
Yes.
As with all things, it's the intent and the meaning. And sometimes you can get away with a cheeky nickname for somebody because of your relationship with them that you wouldn't use in a professional context, introducing them on stage, which is how our conversation began. So all I can, I suppose, summarize my thoughts on it is that it's complicated, and if in doubt, ask.
Which I think is an excellent point at which to close our discussion. We've gone 40 minutes there. Jackie, Cathy, thank you very, very much indeed for joining me on the show. Like any big topic like this with no actual answers, but hopefully we can raise awareness that people will think about this and think about the way in which men and women are positioned relative to each other, and try to make sure that we bring a little bit more gender equality into that. Right, I'm just going to finish off the show. I'll be back with you in a moment. So you can find this show and all previous shows are on my YouTube channel and on the podcast. Just look for Gender Speaker Live, and you'll find them there. Now, next week, starting on the 13th of this month, it's Trans Awareness Week, 13th to 19th of November, and I'm running a trans and non-binary inclusion workshop on the 17th from 10 till 12 in the morning. Please do join me. I'm doing this on a very simple basis of donation basis, pay what you can afford. Just want to encourage people to be there. So please do come and join me. Now, the 20th is Transgender Remembrance Day. That's coming up. I'm going to be doing a little bit about trans. On Sunday, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Trans Remembrance Day. It's a day when we remember the unfortunately large number of transgender people who get murdered every year just because they are trans. So join me on Sunday for that. In the meantime, thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday or on next Wednesday for the show when I'm going to be looking a lot more at transgender awareness. Thank you for being with us. See you again soon.